Rejected and pregnant. A 38-year-old bride sat alone on the depot platform till dark. The letter came on a Tuesday. I know because I'd spent Monday digging out the springhouse drain, and my hands were still cracked from the clay when I read it. My name in ink I didn't recognize. Postmarked Salina, Kansas. I didn't know anybody in Salina. I set it on the table, made coffee, stood at the window and watched the horses in the near pasture for a while, the way a man does when he already suspects something's changed and wants one more ordinary minute before he finds out for sure. The letter was from a lawyer named Creel. My brother Emmett, who I hadn't spoken to in 9 years, had left me his station agent's post in a town called Gila Ford, Wyoming Territory. Left me the house too, a clapboard thing by the depot. Emmett was dead, thrown from a horse in a dry wash, the lawyer wrote, gone 3 weeks before the letter reached me. I stood there a long time. Emmett and I had not parted well. There's no point going through all of it. Old men carrying old business are tedious, and I was 53 then and already tired enough. The short of it is that when our father died, Emmett took the land and I took what pride I had left and rode out. Neither of us wrote. We were like that, the Cade men. We could hold silence the way other men held whiskey tight, and for years. So I sold off what I had, which wasn't much, packed 2 trunks and my saddle, took the Union Pacific West. I didn't know what I was going to. I had the sense, the way you sometimes do, that whatever shape my life had been holding itself in had finally given out. I was a man between things. I'd been a deputy once in a different territory. After that, a hired hand on other men's land. After that, not much I'm proud of, and we'll leave it there. Gila Ford, Wyoming Territory. Population 400 and something. 1 street, 2 saloons, a church that needed paint, a school, and the depot, which was Emmett's kingdom and now, apparently, mine. The train pulled in on a Thursday evening, end of September. The sky was that particular late-day copper color that the high plains do, where the light looks like it weighs something. I stepped off with my bags and stood on the platform, and tried to remember the last time I'd had a thing that belonged to me. That's when I saw her. She was sitting on the far end of the platform bench, the long wooden one outside the station door, with a carpet bag at her feet and a smaller bag in her lap. She was not a young woman. 38, I'd learn. Dark hair going a little silver at the temples, which she hadn't tried to hide. She had on a gray wool traveling dress that had seen some miles, and she was sitting very straight, the way people sit when they are trying not to look as bad off as they are. She wasn't crying. That was the first thing I noticed. She looked like a woman who had decided, somewhere back up the line, that crying wasn't going to answer any of it. The train was already pulling out behind me. There was no one else on the platform. I thought that strange. Somebody waiting to meet her had to be. I picked up my bags and went into the station to find the man who would show me Emmett's books and keys. His name was Garvey Pell, the assistant agent, and he was a small, fussy man who smelled of coal oil and kept touching his mustache. He shook my hand once, hard, and then started talking. I let him talk. I was watching out the window at the woman on the bench. 20 minutes passed. "What's the situation with the woman on the platform?" I said. Pell looked up from the ledger. "Mrs. Well, she's a mail-order match, or was meant to be." He cleared his throat. "Fellow named Dobbins, Jeb Dobbins. He arranged for her to come out from Ohio." He touched his mustache again. "Train came in yesterday. Dobbins showed up, took one look." He paused. "She's, in a condition." He wasn't told, turned around and left. I looked at the woman on the bench. She was sitting there in the dark coming down, hands folded in her lap, back straight. "Yesterday," I said. "Yes, sir. She slept here." "Station waiting room." I opened it for her. He had the decency to look uncomfortable. "I've written to her people in Ohio, but the wire won't. She doesn't have means for the return fare and—" I went back outside. She looked up when she heard my boots. She didn't flinch. She just looked at me with dark eyes that were tired clear through and waited to see what kind of man I was. "My name's Cade," I said. "I'm the new station agent, Emmett Cade's brother." She said nothing. "You've been out here since yesterday." "I have." Her voice was steady. Ohio, like Pell said, a flat, plain quality to it, not unfriendly. "You eaten?" A pause some. I set my bags down on the platform boards, which I didn't particularly think about until later. It was just what my hands did. I sat down on the bench, not close, left a good 3 feet between us. "I'm sorry about how things went," I said, "with Dobbins." "I imagine it's my own fault," she said, "for hoping a stranger would be decent." There was no bitterness in it. That was just her naming a thing plainly. I said, "What's your name?" "Nora Fitch." "Where are you from in Ohio?" "Defiance." I almost laughed. Not at her, at the name. "Defiance, Ohio," I said. She looked at me then, really looked, and I saw the first small thing move in her expression. Not quite a smile, the possibility of one. "My mother found it funny too," she said. We sat there a minute. Across the street, a lamp came on in the window of what I'd learned was the hardware store. "I have a house," I said. "Just came into it. My brother's house. It's got a second room. You'd have your privacy. This isn't anything other than a practical offer to a person in a difficult spot. If you'd rather not, I'll see what the hotel will do for credit." She was quiet a long time. The kind of quiet where she was actually thinking, not performing reluctance. "Why?" she said. "Because you've been sitting on this platform since yesterday and nobody's done anything about it, and that seems wrong." She looked at me another moment, then she picked up her carpet bag. "All right," she said. "Thank you, Mr. Cade. I should tell you something about Emmett's house. It was clean. That surprised me. I'd expected a bachelor's disorder, dishes and dust, and a floor that hadn't seen a broom in months. Instead, the floors were swept and the dishes were stacked right, and there was a box of kindling by the stove and a tin of coffee on the shelf. Emmett, I was learning, had been someone else than what I'd carried in my head all those years. I showed Nora the second room, which had a cot and a washstand and a window that looked east. I showed her where the necessary was out back. I got a fire going in the kitchen stove and heated water for coffee without asking if she wanted any. She just sat at the kitchen table in her coat and watched me do it like a woman watching a thing she's trying to determine whether it's real. I set the cup down in front of her. She wrapped both hands around it. I sat across from her and drank mine, and we didn't talk much. There was nothing in it that needed talking. She was a woman who'd been left on a platform in a strange territory, and I was a man who'd come into a dead brother's house, and neither of us had any clear picture of what came next. After a while she asked if she could help me with the supper. I had what I'd brought in my bag from the train, some salt pork, hardtack, a can of peaches. Not much. She looked at it all and said, "I can make that into something decent." And she did. She found dried beans in a crock on the shelf and a heel of cornmeal, and she made a meal out of nothing that was warm and filling. And when she set it on the table, I noticed she had the kind of capable hands that do things in a kitchen without wasted motion. We ate. She washed up and I dried without either of us deciding to. She said good night and went to her room, and I lay on Emmett's cot in the main room and looked at the ceiling and thought, I do not know what I am doing. In the morning, I went to the station at 7 and began learning Emmett's work. Pell was put out. I could see it in the way he handled the ledgers, presenting them with a kind of tight courtesy that said, "I have been running this place, and I know it better than you," which was true. I told him so. I told him I needed him to teach me, and that I'd be grateful if he did it plainly and without theater. He blinked at me. "Emmett wasn't a man to say that kind of thing," he said, after a pause. "I'm not Emmett." He seemed to find this genuinely surprising, but he opened the ledger and we got to work. The job was straightforward enough. Parcels logged, freight weighed, telegrams received and dispatched, schedules kept. There was a satisfaction to the order of it that I hadn't expected. Numbers that had to add up. A thing arrived or it didn't. The wire worked or you found out why it didn't. The day had a shape. I went back to the house at noon to find Nora had swept the kitchen and the front room and washed the curtains and hung them out to dry on the line in the yard. I stood at the gate and looked at those curtains moving in the wind. "You didn't have to do that," I said. "I know it," she said. She was standing on the porch with a cup of water. "I needed something to do with my hands." I understood that. I understood it in a particular way that a man who has been idle too long understands it, that the hands, when they don't have work, start to betray you. They start shaking or they start reaching for things you'd rather they didn't. I went back inside and made a sandwich and went back to the station. The week settled, October went by. I learned the schedules and the freighters and the particular characters of the men who loaded and unloaded. There was a big Swede named Holst who did the heavy work and didn't talk, which I respected. There was a boy, maybe 16, named Price, who swept and ran messages, quick and sharp-eyed. Pell came around slowly, not warmly, but honestly, and we worked out a rhythm. The town took a look at me. I felt it. The station agent was a seen man in a small place. They came through the depot to send wires and ship goods and pick up parcels, and each one of them got a read on me while pretending not to. I gave them straight dealing and steady hours, and eventually they let up. The thing about Nora was harder to explain. She wasn't my wife. She wasn't my hired girl. She was just there. She cooked in the evening if I brought something home. She kept the house. She walked to the dry goods every few days and I left money in a tin on the shelf, and she was precise about accounting for it, leaving the receipts folded under the tin when she came back. She didn't spend loosely and she didn't ask for more than she needed. I didn't ask her about the child's father. It wasn't my business, and anyway I could see from the way she didn't mention it that the story was one that cost her, and she'd already paid enough. She was showing. She moved differently than when she'd come, more deliberate, one hand sometimes at the small of her back. When she thought I wasn't watching her face, I could see the tiredness in it, and something else, something older than the tiredness. A woman who had been counting on something, and learned not to. One evening in late October I came home, and she was sitting at the kitchen table with a piece of paper in front of her. She was writing a letter. She heard me come in and folded it, quick. "From Defiance," I said. "To," she said, "to my sister." I got my coat off and hung it. I pumped water at the sink and washed my hands. I didn't ask what the letter said, but she told me anyway, in the way people tell things when they've been alone with them too long. "I've been telling her I'm fine," she said. "That things worked out differently than expected, but fine." She smoothed the folded letter with her thumb. "I don't know how much longer I can make that convincing." "Are you fine?" She looked up at me. "I'm better than I was on that platform." "That's not the same thing." "No," she said, "it isn't." I sat down across from her. The lamp was low. Outside, the wind was doing something earnest to the eaves. "What did you want?" I said. "When you got on the train in Defiance, what were you hoping for?" She thought about it. Actually thought about it, didn't just reach for an easy answer. "A person to be steady with," she said. "Somebody who showed up when they said they would, who wasn't looking for a way out." She looked at the letter. "I'd had the other kind." I knew the father of that child was the other kind. I didn't say it, just stayed where I was. "That's not an unreasonable thing to want," I said. "No," she said. "I used to think it was something most people had." She picked up the letter. "I don't think that anymore." She went to bed not long after. I sat at that table a while in the dark. November, the cold came down like it meant it. There was ice on the water bucket 3 mornings in a row. The trains ran late and sometimes not at all, and men came into the station to stand by the stove and wait, and I let them. and Pell was surprised by that too. The boy Price came to me one afternoon with the news that I'd been half expecting. There'd been talk about the woman at the station agent's house, about the condition she was in and who was responsible for it, and what kind of man I was for keeping her. The talk had the usual shape. Gilla Ford was a small place, and small places run on speculation. Thought you should know, Price said, seeing as. Seeing as what? He shrugged. He was 16. He had the wisdom not to say the rest of it. Thank you, I said. I thought about it on the walk home. The way talk gets ahead of a man before he can live his own life into shape. The way a woman's hardship always ends up being her fault, in the mouth of a town that doesn't know what else to do with it. I went in and hung up my coat, and Nora was at the stove, and I said, "There's talk." She turned around, her face went careful. What kind? The kind you'd expect. I poured myself coffee. I want you to know it doesn't change anything on my end. You're here and you're welcome, and nobody else's mouth has anything to do with that. She looked at me a long time. I was looking at the coffee. Cade, she said. It's fine, I said. No, she said it quietly, the way she said most things. I mean, yes, it's fine, but I want to say. I looked up. I know what you've done for me, she said. I know you didn't have to, and I know how it looks to some people, and I know it doesn't cost you nothing, even if you don't say so. She was holding a wooden spoon and she wasn't looking away. I'm not going to pretend that's ordinary. It isn't. I didn't know what to do with that. I was not a man who'd been thanked much. Not honestly. Not by someone who was looking me straight and meant it. You'd have done all right without me, I said. Eventually. Maybe, she said, but eventually isn't nothing. December came. The first hard snow fell on the 3rd, and Gilla Ford went quiet the way it does when the wind is serious. I was at the station till 9 waiting on a freight car that didn't come. When I got back to the house, there was a lamp still burning in the kitchen window, and Nora was up. You didn't have to wait up, I said. I wasn't waiting, she said. I couldn't sleep. She was 8 months along. She moved slowly and she slept badly, and I heard her sometimes at night getting up for water or just sitting in her room in the dark. I never asked. A person's insomnia is their own. She poured me coffee without being asked and sat back down at the table. I took off my boots. The stove was good and warm. Outside the snow was still going. Can I ask you something? She said. Go ahead. Why did you sit down? I looked at her. On the platform, she said. That first night, you just arrived. You had every reason to go inside and leave it to Pell, but you sat down. I thought about it. I turned the cup in my hands. I don't entirely know, I said. You looked like a woman who wasn't going to ask for help even if she needed it. And that seemed like, I don't know, a waste. A waste, she said. Waste of a capable person. She was quiet, then she said, that's an odd reason. Maybe. Most men would have said they felt sorry for me. I didn't feel sorry for you, I said. I thought you'd been put in a bad spot that wasn't your fault. That's different. She was looking at me in a way I couldn't name, the lamp between us. It is different, she said. Most people don't know it is. Her time came on the 14th of December. I went for the doctor in the middle of the night, running through snow past my boots, and the doctor was a man named Abelard who was 60-something and unhurried, which I found equal parts reassuring and maddening. He came with his bag and he went into her room, and I sat in the kitchen and drank coffee and then water and then just sat. It was a long night, not as long as some, Abelard told me after, but long enough. The child was a girl, small but whole. She made noise right away, which Abelard said was the thing you wanted. I heard it through the door, that particular thin, sharp sound, and I sat there at the kitchen table and felt something happen in my chest that I have no better word for than opening, like a room in a house that's been shut too long. When Abelard came out, He washed his hands at the sink and told me what to watch for and what to do, and said Nora was tired but well. He looked at me in the particular way doctors look at a man in this kind of circumstance. "You the father?" he said. "No," I said. He looked at me another moment, packed his bag. He was not a man who needed things explained. "She did well," he said. "Strong woman." "I know it," I said. He went out into the snow. I waited another 10 minutes and then knocked softly on the door. Nora's voice said, "Come in." She was in the bed with the child against her chest. She was pale and there was a tiredness in her face that went all the way down, and through it, somehow, a quality I can only call settled, like a thing resolved. "Come here," she said. Her voice was rough. I came to the bedside. I didn't know what to do with my hands. "Hold her a minute," Nora said. "I need to just hear." She held the child out. I took her. She weighed almost nothing. She was warm and she smelled clean and new, which was not what I expected, and her face was scrunched and serious and already looked like it had opinions. I stood there with this child I had no claim to and did not know, and felt the strangeness of it so completely that for a moment I forgot to breathe. "Her name is Josephine," Nora said. "That's a good name." "My mother's." She was watching me. "How does she look?" "Like herself," I said. "Already entirely like herself." Nora smiled then. First full real smile I'd seen from her. It changed the whole geometry of her face. "Sit down, Cade," she said. "You look like you're about to fall over." I sat in the chair by the window. The snow was going still outside. I held Josephine against my chest and she made a small sound and then was quiet, and after a while Nora was asleep too. I sat there until the light came. January. The talk changed after Josephine was born. Towns are odd that way. A baby will do what a man's good behavior can't. Josephine gave people something to settle around. A new fact about the house by the depot that allowed them to reshuffle the story into something they could live with. Mrs. Halloran at the dry goods started calling Nora your lady when she spoke to me, which was presumptuous, but I let it go. Nora was nursing and sleeping in fragments and spending long hours in the chair by the kitchen stove with Josephine against her, and she looked, I want to say worn because she was, but that's not all of it. She looked like a woman who had come through something and wasn't looking away from the fact of it. She started helping at the station in February, just a few hours. Price would go sit with Josephine and Nora would come in and work the telegraph, which she'd learned back in Ohio. She'd worked in office, she said, before the situation with the child's father, and she was fast and accurate, and within 2 weeks she knew our regular traffic better than Pell did. Pell pretended not to notice, which was its own kind of acknowledgement. I found I liked having her there. Not in a soft way, I mean I found the work felt different, more purposeful, like it was pointed at something beyond just turning the day over. She asked questions about the books and I answered them, and she had a clear, precise way of understanding things that I respected. One evening she asked why Emmett had left me the post. I don't know, I said. Did you ask the lawyer? Creel. He didn't know either, said there was no note. She was quiet a moment. Maybe he didn't need a resin, she said. Maybe he just needed to do right by somebody. I'd thought about that. The way a thing done too late is still a thing done. Maybe, I said. You're easier on him than you think you are, she said. I looked at her. The way you keep his house, she said. The way you took his job seriously. The way you talk about him when you do. She was looking at the station ledger, not me. You're not as angry as you think you are. I didn't answer. She wasn't wrong. That was the problem. March and the first real thaw. There was a morning where the mud was back, and the horses were stupid with the warmth, and Josephine was 14 weeks old and had started smiling, which is not something I had expected to have a feeling about. You don't expect a 14-week-old to smile at you, and you certainly don't expect it to rearrange something in your chest. Nora caught me making a face at the child to get another smile. I stopped. Don't stop, she said. She likes it. She doesn't know what she likes. She knows what she likes, Nora said. She likes you. She said it the way she said most things, plain, not to make something out of it, just a true thing stated. But it landed somewhere it didn't expect to. I went back to making the face. Josephine smiled. April. I need to say this part right because it's the part I've turned over the most, and I don't want to dress it up, and I don't want to shortchange it either. There was an evening in April, the mud just drying out, the light staying long the way it does in spring, and I was on the porch after supper looking at the pasture to the east where Halst kept 3 horses, and Nora came out and stood beside me. We stood there for a while without talking, which we did sometimes. Which was, maybe, the thing I valued most about her company. That silence didn't make her anxious. Then she said, I've been thinking. All right. About the spring, when the trains start running regular again. There's a situation in, she paused. Mrs. Halloran mentioned a boarding house in Cheyenne. That takes in women of circumstances. I could take the telegraph work. Josephine's old enough to travel now. I looked at the horses. I said, is that what you want? A pause. I don't know what I want, she said. That's the honest answer. I know what I think I ought to do, and that's not always the same thing. What do you think you ought to do? Not be a burden. You're not a burden. Cade, her voice was patient, not correcting me, just steady. You know what I mean. I did. I knew what she meant. A woman with no claim on a man does not stay in his house indefinitely, not without cost to both of them, not in a small town with a long memory. I don't want you to go, I said. A real one. Say that again, she said. I turned and looked at her. She was looking at me with those dark eyes and the gray at her temples and the slight tiredness she always carried, and she was entirely herself. This woman who hadn't cried on that platform, who'd made a meal out of nothing, who could run a telegraph without thinking about it, who'd come through a winter alone in a strange place with a child on the way, and stayed straight-spined through all of it. I don't want you to go, I said. I don't know how else to put it than that. You could put it differently, she said, if you wanted to. I stood there, 53 years old. A man who had run from things and buried things and been hard and cold and useful to people when it suited them, and invisible the rest of the time. And I stood on my dead brother's porch in the spring light, and I said, Nora, I'd like you to stay, properly, as my wife if you'd have me. And if you won't, I'll help you get to Cheyenne myself, and I'll wire the boarding house, and I'll see to it you and Josephine are set before I let you go. But I'd rather you didn't go. She didn't answer right away. She reached over and took my hand. Not dramatically, just took it, the way you take something you've decided belongs with you. I was wondering, she said, when you were going to say it. I looked at her. I've been watching you for 7 months, she said. I know what kind of man you are. She looked down at our hands and then back up. I know you showed up. I know you didn't have to. I know you've been the same man every single day, which is rarer than you think. Her voice was steady, no performance in it. I would be glad to be your wife. I'd be proud to. I held her hand and looked out at Halst's horses in the long spring light. She stood beside me, and neither of us said anything for a while. The last thing the sun touched was the ridge to the west, and then it was gone, and the dark came on blue and slow, and the first stars put themselves out, and we were still standing there. We were married in May. The preacher's name was Halby, and he was a tall man with an unfortunate hat, and he married us in the front room of the house with Price, and Halst as witnesses and Josephine asleep in her basket through the whole thing, which seemed right. Halst brought a bottle of something Scandinavian and sweet that Nora said tasted like medicine, and then took a second glass of. Pell came and shook my hand and said, Emmett would have liked her, which was the most generous thing he'd said to me. I think he was right. I think Emmett left me this post the way a man leaves something he should have done sooner, knowing he was out of time to fix the larger thing, but maybe hoping the smaller one would open something up. Maybe that's giving him too much credit. I'll never know. But I sat with him a while in my head that evening, the way you sit with the dead when you've made your peace with them, and I let it be what it was. I've been in Gilla Ford 11 years now. Josephine is 10 and she runs through this house like weather. She's her mother's daughter in her face and something else entirely in her temperament. Stubborn and curious and not afraid of anything she should be afraid of. She can already do sums in her head faster than Pell ever could, and she knows it, and she tries not to show that she knows it, which is another thing she got from her mother. Nora still works the telegraph, faster than anyone we've had. She knows half the families in the territory by the way they word their messages, by what they say and what they don't. There's a thing that happens some mornings when I come into the station and she's already there, already at the wire, coffee going on the small stove in the corner. She looks up when she hears me come in. Not always, she's usually in the middle of something, but sometimes. And when she does, there's a look she gets that I cannot fully describe. It's not a grand thing. It's just recognition. The way a person looks at somebody they chose and are still choosing and are not surprised to find. I spent a lot of years not being anyone's first thought, not worth seeing, not worth the trouble. I know what I am now. I know it because she tells me, not with words mostly, with that look, with the way she handed me her daughter to hold the night Josephine was born, with the way she said, "I know what kind of man you are" on a porch in April, and meant it. Some men go a whole life and never have that. I've had 11 years of it and counting. The trains come in on schedule. The wire runs clear. Josephine is learning cursive and hates it. Nora brought in dried flowers last week and put them in a jar on the station counter, and Pell said it wasn't regulation, and she told him it wasn't regulation to have an opinion about flowers either, and I stood at the back of the room and said nothing and was, for the first time in as long as I can remember, entirely content. This is not a story about getting what you wanted when you were young. It's about being worth something to the right person when you're old enough to know what that means. And that's the thing I wanted to tell you. That it happened, that it was real, that the woman saw me, not what I had, not what I could be talked into, not the idea of me, just me, standing on a platform on a copper sky evening in Wyoming with my 2 bags and my dead brother's legacy, and not much else. She looked and she stayed. A man can't ask for more than that. He really can't.